destructive things. And here's that cactus. If you think back to the day after, or the 8 days now before, that cactus, that it was the edge of that building that is completely gone. You see the floor of the building is all that's left there. On one corner, the little cactus plantings survived, and here they are. So they stood there. They weren't even knocked over. And you might say, well, maybe the wind wasn't at that level. But you see, the wind was at that level, because look at the embedded leaves that the wind was coming in. And blowing through there. Didn't knock down this plant, but it took the brunt of that wind, and you can see the direction of that wind as leaves were simply blown into that cactus. A sign of the times kind of thing. So this is all going to be repaired, but it's really something to see the effect of that wind. Here we are on 9/19, so this is Sunday. We had started on 9/18 with some inventory work. One of our goals was for a whole bunch of different purposes. We want to identify the trees that came down. We want to GPS where they are. We're doing that. We want to GPS where they were, identify them, and measure their diameter. So sometimes we're doing that from stumps and trying to piece together as much as we can, figuring out from earlier records what that tree was, because we can estimate with wonderful new USDA Forest Service models the environmental services that are lost. So we want to know what there was lost from these trees. So we are in the middle of an inventory. It's over 775 trees now. We're moving on that inventory on 9/22. 3 days after this picture was taken, because we want to say what services were lost from these trees and what that has meant. But it's also a really interesting emotional thing to do. Instead of just saying, hey, we lost a bunch of trees, we can say exactly what we lost. And there is a certain kind of emotional importance of doing that, by being able to do that. And we'll be mapping those out with GPS. And when we get eventually into some of our programs coming up with our Why Trees Matter Forum on October 20th, we'll be able to say what was lost. Here's Laura Chatfield, showing the size of this tree here. Here, it's kind of back from the future. It's not Arnold Schwarzenegger, but Kathy Herms is arriving with some of our better GPS unit that we're going to use for our inventory. And we're looking at trees, a lot of interesting things uncovered there, looking back to the history of this tree and looking especially at that nice little ring there of the compartmentalization of damage that had occurred at one point with that tree. So we learn a lot of history when we see trees in this little look. Here, Kathy Herms on the right is showing her GPS unit versus the primitive one we were using up to that point. So it's kind of an interesting perspective from the primitive and advanced GPS units. And here, though, measuring those diameters, it's kind of easier to measure diameters rather than going all the way around with a diameter tape when you have a trunk there. And these incredible urban elms behind Gurley Hall, and the kind of thing we've learned here with the kind of growth rings these are magnificent growth rings in the early years of that tree. So we're seeing some stuff. Again, the devastation in that farm shop. Charles Kraus, Dr. Charles Kraus, USDA, in that Ag Engineering building, really looking at the rubble of his lab and all the work that they're doing there. And they're being relocated and moving forward. But here he's getting some help from Carol Whitaker and Bobby Mosier and Steve Slack as he's pondering this last Sunday. From a nearby greenhouse, the embedding of all kinds of material in trees just blown out by the force of the wind. The damage to these wonderful rows of pin oaks as you move out toward the Arboretum. Again, Crablandia 1 kind of isn't there anymore. Again, over and over, these key people here, Ken Cochran and Steve Slack, talking over their plans. And then all these raining acorns. It was a big year for acorns, a big mast year, and they've been clustered here together. And Parvis eglandibus quercus, mighty oaks from little acorns grow. So, this shall return. Again, trees actually coming down as the big equipment is moving in, and they need to create safe areas. John Cardina from the Horticulture and Crop Science Department measuring a 42-inch sycamore. Kathy Herms from the Horticulture and Crop Science Department, really putting a little touch on this bone structure of the landscape, the wonderful sycamores that came down. And just, again, the power of wind and these new hybrid trees that we have here with metal embedded in them. Here was the biggest tree that we've done so far on our inventory, a 53-inch sycamore here on Monday, 9/20. Bruce Cubberley from the Agricultural Technical Institute, John Cardina from Horticulture and Crop Science. And I've got my foot here. I'm Jim Chatfield from the OSU Extension, and got my foot in what I think is mostly crabapple dust. So this is golden crabapple dust taken from Crablandia 1. And here we are doing our measurements on some of these crab apples, and here there's a stump there, but John Cardina is standing by, but you see it's kind of become little trash heaps now. And on top of one of these crab apples, really don't know where it came from or when it got there, but it's from Gurley Hall Greenhouse, about a quarter to a half mile away back on campus. So how it got there, you just have to imagine. These three big oaks behind the stone house, and just looking at Bruce Cubberly, Kathy Herms, and John Cardina standing at the base of those trees, and just getting an idea of the trees that were uprooted. Bruce up on top of one of these, John Cardina with Selby Hall in the background with this tree, just to give again a scope of the size of these. And there the tree amigos are. Showing what we're really talking about here, and Kathy giving this one a nice big hug, like with Laura Dern in Jurassic Park with I think it was maybe a Triceratops. And here, Joe Cochran, this wonderful man that works with Ken Cochran in the Arboretum, and they're here they are talking with Jim Karcher. The grounds crew. These are three wonderful men, and I'm not sure who was blocked here, but I'm sure he's a great guy too, looking at their plans for what comes next. Here, look at this ginkgo. It stopped a silo. A silo came off the old feed mill, and it was headed across the street to hit a local business. And this multi-thousand-pound silo was stopped by this ginkgo tree here. Hard to imagine that, but it really was what stopped that from going across Secrest Road. Denise Ellsworth, an OSU Extension educator from Summit County, is seeing some things for the first time and getting a big hug from Ken. Denise has put tremendous work into the Arboretum over the years, and there is Ken Cochran. And he's starting to think about the future and work things in, and there's Joe Cochran. Again, he is out there every day turning this Arboretum back into what will eventually be even greater than it's been before. Clouds, we have funnel clouds, but when we left the Arboretum with our inventory team on Monday, the 20th, we look at clouds from both sides now. There was that funnel cloud, but look how beautiful that day was and the clouds that were there. Here the next morning, a hawk is kind of surveying what's going on back here in the rhododendron alley, kind of surveying some changed environs. And my wife mentioned on Sunday how the songbirds seem to be kind of acting oddly. I think their reference points were changed by things being different. But here clematis is climbing, and there'll be clematis that climbs onto down trees that will be beautiful. An artificial leaf. We're down in the valley near where the katsura trees are, and we're climbing over big trees to get our inventory done. And there's an artificial leaf that blew in with its artificial fall color from somewhere. But it's kind of interesting to consider where that came from. And then umbrella magnolias. Maybe this will be the source of a new grove, as John and Bruce and Kathy pose with that. Again, the kind of damage, and again, the size of the trees there that you really see that are occurring. This was on Tuesday, the 22nd of September, and there Bill Ravlin and Dan Herms are talking to the students and staff and faculty there in front of Thorne Hall to the entomology department group, talking about what's next. Come in, get your data, your computers, do some things, and we're going to get back to full-scale activity here as soon as we can once the big equipment cleanup is occurring. So some of these people are seeing things for the first time because there's been such limited access. But here they're getting really good explanations of where we are and what comes next. Again, the root systems of these urban elms, the kind of cleanup that's occurring now with the people that are on here and here at the Ag Engineering building, and it's even getting down to raking things up and getting shards of glass out of there. Bogner Construction, what a magnificent job. It's unbelievable what is done here, 9/22/10, 6 days later. It's just really an unbelievable process that's occurred. Here, agriculture and horticultural meet, as we have a tree trunk kind of bound to a bale of hay out by the old feed mill. And here, Jennifer Gray of the Ohio Nursery and Landscape Association. The green industry has been very supportive. They want to come in and help, and of course it's not quite time that people can come in to do some things that they'd like to do. And here with Ken Cochran kind of surveying the damage, offering help, and Jennifer was so helpful in helping Ken. She's a great writer, editor, help Ken with some messages he's getting out about how people can support the Arboretum, and checking out those OSU sites, giving sites for OSU. Here, Polyporus sulphureus on oak. Steve Namath, who had a wonderful luncheon for people yesterday over at ATI, also noticed this wonderful. Is reminding us of kind of what we do. And so here is a decay fungus on an oak, and it's the sulfur fungus, and one of the things that will be interesting in that forested area, we're going to get a lot of decay fungi, and we're going to learn from that. And here Jennifer and Ken are posing with that, and then Jennifer hugging Charles Kraus because she knows the green industry works so much with USDA on these ag engineering projects, and kind of getting from him what's going on. And then Ken, Tree Huggers Unite, Ken and Chuck Kraus.